Gene Maine, a Colorado refugee from the old Soviet Union, loves his son. His ex-wife, an elite Boulder academic, believes the boy should be a girl. She takes pride in this belief. Children's Hospital Colorado, which hosts a profiteering unit of quacks who convinced children they were created as mistakes, has this young boy on a transgendering journey the father is trying to stop before it's too late. It all comes amid battles at the U.S. Supreme Court this past week to determine whether state laws can protect children from gender mutilations packaged as legitimate health care. Learn about this family nightmare here. Be sure to share and subscribe if you want to support innocent children and restore sanity to Colorado politics and culture. And as always, please thank and patronize our major sponsors, Interstate Roofing and Integrity Bank and Trust.
Welcome to Wayne's World, rising above the noise and confusion.
It's Wayne's Word.
Oh.
Welcome, Gene, to this edition of Wayne's Word. It's great to have you on the set. Thanks for making the trip down here.
Glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So let's just get right into the point of this show. You are one of many, many parents in Colorado who are jeopardized by the fact that we have a gender transition craze going on in this state.
Cult.
A cult.
Let's use it for what it is. It's a cult.
Okay, last year we had the legislature pass a deadnaming bill, which made it very difficult for teachers, parents. It threatened to jeopardize custody even for parents should a child change his or her name and the parent doesn't go along with it, or maybe even accidentally doesn't go along with it. My mother had many grandchildren. She's deceased now. One of them changed her name, and she never, ever got used to the new name and could never become accustomed to it. Now we have the SB 26018 this year introduced in the Senate, which is going to strengthen what was called the deadnaming bill. And this concerns legal protections for the dignity of a minor and in connection therewith suppressing a court record associated with changing a minor's name. So unlike last year's bill, this really sort of strengthens what was passed last year. This goes to court procedure. Your son or daughter could go and have a name change, and they can seal the record. You have no way of even knowing about this. And there's a lot of other stuff in here that just has to do with what a child can secretly do in court. But I want to talk about your story. You have 3 children, correct?
I do.
2 of them are twins.
2 of them, the oldest ones are twins. They're now 15.
They're the oldest, 15. A girl and a boy.
A girl and a boy, and I have another girl.
And you have a nightmare regarding one of those twins involving a hospital here in Colorado. I believe it's Children's Hospital. Is that correct?
It's the Children's Hospital, something called True Center, TRUE, which is actually an abbreviation.
And they have specialized for years in
they are one of
changes for youth, for young people,
for children under 18, and as years went by, younger and younger children. And we got caught up in that trap.
It's called the True Center for Gender Diversity.
Exactly.
True standing for trust, respect, understand, emerge. Now,
which is kind of funny because they stand for quite the opposite.
Okay.
It's a lie. It's an organization created out of a lie.
Okay.
Using people that are, let's just say, unscrupulous. And we are using them to slide towards what the Nazi Germany did to children.
And you would know. Okay,
and
so
I can speak about that. Yes.
The True Center, I mean, I would think that I consider a lot of the physicians who are in this business to be quacks, the same kind of people who go into other sort of extreme elements of healthcare that are marginally healthcare at best and usually not healthcare at all. Say late-term convenience abortion doctors are quacks.
The word quack is too nice. It's like calling an attorney a shyster.
Okay.
They're not quacks.
Not all attorneys are shysters. Most of them are perfectly good people, but we know what you're talking about. You're talking about the ones on the margin.
Yeah, a percentage. Okay. They're not quacks. What they are is they're not doctors. I could not call them doctors any more than I can call, Joseph Mengele a doctor.
Right.
Doctor is not just years of training and practice. Doctor is also adhering to certain rules, certain criteria, certain moral obligations. They don't have that.
Yeah, I mean, they take an oath, the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. There's a big organization that's gaining ground nationally called Do No Harm that's trying to remind physicians that they took an oath to do no harm to their patients. Now, what I want to know what's going on with your son, correct? This is my son. This is the twin of yours who was created as a male species.
He wasn't assigned male gender at birth. He was created.
That's the most ridiculous thing I ever hear in the world. Where someone says, even people who would be on my side on this issue, who think it's ridiculous to, give a mastectomy to an 8-year-old or to otherwise, interfere in the sexual development of a young person, will say the gender assigned at birth. Of course, nothing is assigned at birth. That was assigned the moment of conception.
Doctors,
but that's getting far afield.
Well,
yeah.
We can discuss that too, sure. Or let me just start with my history, sure. Or rather my son's history.
Let's do that. I want to hear about your history with your son and what's going on with your son, because you're in court fighting it, as I understand.
Yes, I am.
Okay, tell me the story, because for a long time, Children's Hospital Colorado has been a leader in what you call this cult movement. Yep. I, in fact, have a very good friend who ranks among those people, I hate to talk that way, but that segment of the population, again, this is a good friend, but he's very liberal, very progressive, and he had a child who thought he or she, I'm not going to say because I don't want to narrow this down to anyone who knows who my friends are, he or she was born into the wrong body, went through a name change, and believed that, at a very young age, believed that he or she was a mistake.
Yep.
And the parent was not the least bit concerned of this, but wore it as a badge of honor. And the fact that it was sort of encouraging this child to pursue this idea that he or she was a mistake.
Yes.
And I was, very lovingly disagreed with him and with my friend, and had lots of conversations about it. And it ended up where it ended up. We don't need to go there. But right. I know that this is not a marginal demographic, especially in a blue state like Colorado. It's a fairly common demographic. Now tell me about your son.
Okay. Of course, the causes of all of this go way, way back, and they're more complicated than we can discuss in a short podcast. But it does go all the way back to, oh my God, how far back do you want to go?
Well, how far back do we need to go? When did things start happening?
Let's talk about my son and not talk about the generic terms, because we can go all the way back to the French Revolution.
Sure.
Let's not do that. My twins were born in 2010. My ex-wife had some serious alcohol and drug issues, and the twins have been in therapy, through most of their lives. Okay, and that's what happens when you have alcohol and breast milk, right? There's price that children pay for parents' misbehavior. My wife cleaned up since then. She is easier to deal with, but she is a Boulder socialite. She is, without narrowing it too much, very high placed in Boulder society.
I'm guessing probably has, like many, many people in Boulder. I spent 17 wonderful years in Boulder. Glad not to be there now.
Yeah.
But probably highly educated, maybe a PhD.
Yep.
Okay.
And associated with CU,
PhD, very, very far out on the liberal extreme of the political spectrum, I would say.
Well, let's give the credit where credit is due. She does have some normal views, but living in Boulder for years and years and years, you obviously skid to the left. So by Boulder standards, she would be just like an average Democrat, which by the rest of the world standards is way to the left.
Right. And I don't know, a lot of our viewers are in Colorado. A lot of them aren't. A lot of them who are in Colorado aren't that familiar with Boulder, but Boulder is an extreme progressive environment.
I think the expression you're looking for is People's Republic of Boulder.
It's often called that humorously.
So, and I think
People's Republic
people know
of
what
Boulder.
what that means.
And you are a former Soviet, correct? So,
I was born in the Soviet Union. I defected when I was 16, first to California and then to Colorado, and I've been here since 1995.
Okay. So when someone says, have you spent time in Boulder? Have you lived in Boulder?
I lived in Longmont, which is
suburban Boulder.
I don't know, 10 miles from Boulder.
It's in what I call Boulderia.
Boulder. Well, it's in Boulder County. It's Boulder County. It's a slightly more conservative version of Boulder. So back in 2000 to 2010, in 2000s, earlier 2000s, the prestigious thing in Boulder was to have a gay child. Mm-hmm. Having a gay child in the upper crust circles just gave you a certain status. It gave you this certain, well, I am so open, I am so willing, I am so understanding kind of vibe.
Again, this is not uncommon throughout Colorado.
No, it's
not at all.
Not uncommon in the world.
If you're talking Minnesota, you're talking California, you talk any of the famously dark blue states.
How about any college town, even in the red state?
Right. It is, and it is a badge. I've seen this many times. Like I said, my friend, and he is a good friend. I have friends on the left. I don't dislike people because we disagree on some political things. But I'm honest with them too as to where I feel. But yes, this parent I'm talking about was honored to have a child who thought that he or she was created in the wrong body. Okay, it was a badge of honor, I guarantee.
Somebody famous, somebody smarter than me said that the dumbest ideas come from the highly educated people. And it's true. That's when you're isolated from the real world by the education system, you tend to come up with some goofy stuff.
Right.
So, fine and dandy, in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, my twins were 5. And my now ex-wife declared both of them to be gay.
The boy was gay and the girl was gay.
Oh, yeah. They're both gay. So I kind of went, 5-year-olds? And again, I didn't know anything about, any of these issues. I said, how about we take them to a shrinker? So we found a very good psychiatrist. He did several sessions with them. He came back with a bill and said, well, they're 5-year-old boy and girl. They're asexual. They're just boy and a girl, come back when they're, 15.
Right.
It
just makes sense. How would you at 5 and you haven't gone through puberty?
No, they don't know what they are,
I've had 6 children who've all gone through puberty, and they're very different children after they go through puberty than before they go through puberty.
Exactly.
Some things improve, some things get worse. It's an amazing transition that happens. But anyway, so
it's part of growing up.
At 5,
identifying who you are.
At 5, your very progressive, highly educated wife thinks she knows for a fact that they're gay.
She knows for sure that they're gay.
Okay.
So that kind of put a kibosh on that for a little bit. Now what would you guess, about 2015, 2017, before the pandemic, the priorities of the highly educated changed. It was now fashionable to have a trans child. Now, that made you an even open, because, gay, everybody, knows what gay is. But trans, Now that's really open mind. That's really sophisticated. That's really woke when the term started coming into the lexicon.
Sure, because being LGBTQ in terms of simply being lesbian or gay, which is most of the LGBTQ community, that became common, mainstream.
Yeah, it became pedestrian. Yeah,
and,
he's gay, whatever.
Among adults, I don't care how they associate. Whether it's not my problem. It's not my business. I don't judge anyone that way. But that became it's not much of a minority status it's anymore to go and say
gay marriage is legal, gay rights are there.
Yeah, so this sort of came in and created a new standard of
it created a new fight and a new quest.
Yes.
Okay. Let's not talk about the the advocacy groups. We can talk about that forever, maybe another time. My children started getting drip, drip, drip of transsexuality. Now, let me preface the rest of it with two things. One is, I think my son is gay. I'm reasonably sure, now that he is 15, that he is probably gay. And that's fine with me.
And he's been through puberty.
No, he has not. We'll talk
15,
about that in a second.
Okay.
Second.
So he may not be. You don't know for sure. You never know. But probably.
I'm guessing.
Okay.
No. I mean.
You would know your son much better than I, so.
I think so.
Yeah.
But let's save that for a second. The second part is to tell you where I stand on all of this.
Okay.
You see, I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. I'm a Libertarian. So I only vote for people that have no chance of winning.
Right. I have my libertarian tendencies myself.
Yes.
I am registered, but as a Republican, but I completely understand the libertarian perspective.
I voted for Democrats. I voted for Republicans. I voted for Libertarians. The last time was Joe Jorgensen, who got us from 4% all the way to 1.5%.
I seldom vote party line.
I voted for Trump this time. And the reason I voted for Trump wasn't because, I was enamored with his personality. He's a little too boorish New Yorker for me. I voted for him on the transgender stance. Because the libertarian stance, the stance I've always had, was be and let be.
That's the way I am with adults. I've never had taken issue. I've never even been shocked by
said it.
A transgender person who is an adult. That has never even shocked my sensibilities, let alone that I would have take any stance against it. My whole issue is when it comes to what people do to children. Yes. I have the same exact stance that I with sex changes, and we're here to hear about your position, not mine. But mine would be the same way that I feel about tattoos. I have 6 adult children. One of them still a teenager. About half of them are tattooed. It's fine with me. I didn't want any of them getting tattooed before they were at least 17, 18 years old. This is a permanent decision.
It's a permanent decision that isn't quite as drastic as what we're discussing, or we'll be discussing in a second.
Okay.
Yes, if you tattoo a swastika on your forehead, we have a problem.
Right.
If you have a small tattoo somewhere covered by a sleeve, no big deal. You can remove a tattoo. You can change your views. You cannot regrow a penis. So starting in about, I would guess, maybe 2018, as my son was becoming, older and more mature, we discovered that, he is not this butch kind of boy. He doesn't like sports. Incidentally, neither do I, although I did watch the last quarter of the Broncos yesterday. He liked dancing. Well, so did I, because I constantly pushed him into dancing, and he's good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are all dancers gay? No. Is a higher percentage? Probably. Probably higher percentage of gay men in dancing than there is in, football.
And you're talking about your son.
Don't
you
care.
pushed him into dancing, correct?
I did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I had my 2 oldest sons in ballet when they were young, just because I thought it was good for them.
Yep.
I've had a son who I thought for all the world was probably gay at one point. He did girl things. He was a cheerleader. He did all the things that he hung out with the girls. And then he went through puberty, and next thing I know, he's a bull rider. So this is the way things go with children. They can turn out to be anything.
You have to give them enough of a lead to discover the world, okay? Hoping that they will still retain the values you're trying to instill into them, But ultimately, at some point, you no longer have control of them.
And I have never tried to instill in them values that say a gay person is bad and a straight person is good. I would never do that. I never have. That is not where I stand. Or that a trans person is bad and a non-trans person is good. I don't go there with my children. They've never been brought up that way. Those are not my values. Again, I don't care what somebody does as an adult as long as it doesn't hurt someone else.
Being born in Russia, in the Soviet Union, that's probably about as anti-gay homophobic society as it gets, with the possible exception of Iran.
Right.
So I grew up with knowing no gays, no gay issues, no gay people, because they were all killed or in jail.
Let me interject for a minute. If
Yes.
you haven't gone back and watched any of my previous episodes of Wayne's Word,
I have.
and I would encourage anyone listening to go watch the one where we went and interviewed a group called the Denver Communists.
Watch it, because that's the first one I watched of Wayne's Word, and it's hilarious.
It is kind of funny because they were advocating global communism, and they were also advocating global intifada. They want Islamic rule around, and if not Islamic, theocratic rule, they want communist rule, and they are all out there protesting a coffee shop because the owner is Christian and thinks homosexuality is a sin. And I asked them, if you walked into, a theocratic, the West Bank, looking like this, if they could find a building to throw you off of, you would be done in about 10 minutes. You'd last about 10 minutes.
You're lucky they have no buildings left.
And almost all socialist dictators, right up to the current ones, including Maduro, have outlawed and punished homosexuality.
Yep.
So I don't understand why the left is so enamored with these left-wing theocracies and dictatorships.
I do.
Explain.
A long explanation could be a podcast of its own, but it is what is called cultural Marxism, okay? If you look at Karl Marx, who stole his ideas from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, if anybody knows about French Enlightenment of the 18th century, it splits the world into, Marx called it proletariat and bourgeoisie. Now we're calling it oppressors and oppressed, because proletariat bourgeoisie didn't work out for the communists.
Same exact concept. We're talking about a semantic difference.
It's a concept of oppressors and the victims of oppression. And one of the biggest communist slogans was proletariat of the world, unite. Now, what does that mean? Take everyone that is on your side until you overthrow the regime. You can weed them out later. Communists did that with anarchists, with Jews. Of course, you always got to kill the Jews. I mean, that's a given, right?
It starts there.
It always starts and ends with, we need to get rid of the Jews. Get rid of anyone that's rich, anyone educated, anyone whatever. But that comes later. First, you got to get the power. And to get the power, you need everyone and everything. And the oppressed of the world unite is what we have today in the cultural Marxism. And why would you have gays from Palestine? Because both of them are in the oppressed group. Now, whether gays are oppressed or not is a different story, certainly not in the Western societies.
But there are gays in Western society who think they are.
Oh, absolutely. And, certain portion maybe are.
Yeah, I'm sure
they're looked at, it's like, that's weird. What? You sleep with someone, this is my wife, is your wife, and
we
you're both
couldn't
girls?
know that
Sure.
experience unless we've lived it.
Yeah.
Neither of us have lived it.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, while it's commonplace in Islamic theocratic societies and left-wing dictatorships to punish by death homosexuals and anyone else associated with what LGBTQ stands for,
Mm-hmm.
that is certainly not the case in any Western civilized society.
No.
Not Israel,
but
not
in the
United
Islamic countries,
States.
you also kill communists. You kill infidels, a Christian, somebody with a cross on his neck, that's a dead. Again, the Jews, let's not forget, you always got to start with the Jews and end with them. So that is why these groups exist. That's how this comes about, is the coalition of oppressed. Okay? Does it make sense? No. Why are these people so active and so rabid in their beliefs? Well, now you have to go back to about 1960s. And you have to ask yourself, how did this get started? Who started it? How was it started? Why is it continuing now? And you go into some very interesting areas of, how should I put it? Gentle persuasion. Are you familiar with the name Yuri Bezmenov? He was a KGB colonel who defected to the West. I think he defected to Canada, I want to say late 1970s. And he had a great interview with the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation Services, whatever they are.
Canadian Broadcast, whatever it is, yeah.
Them. And I heard it in the early 80s, and then I saw it again a few years ago on YouTube. And I said, holy cow, now this guy's long dead. But from the grave, he called it. He explained exactly how, at the time, the Soviet Union infiltrated and brainwashed people, and how many generations it takes from this to that, and where do you start? He described the entire anthology of how this was created, the entire process. That process stopped with the demise of the Soviet Union, but it was picked up. It disappeared in the early 90s, but then reappeared in early 2000s, because the world doesn't like vacuum. If there's a vacuum, it's going to get filled. I think it's called the law of entropy or something. It was filled by the Chinese, it was filled by Qataris, it was filled by militant Islamists, and they continued the tradition. So now we are on the third generation of this massive quiet effort. And this is what we're seeing. And again, I don't want to spend 2 hours on this.
And what age were you when you left the Soviet?
16.
Okay, you were 16.
Almost 16.
Okay. How does your experience there and everything you've just relayed to us about, the haves and the have-nots, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, how on God's green earth does this relate to you and your son and Children's Hospital Colorado?
My son came out to me in 2022 and said, Dad, I think I'm in the wrong body. And I said, what? I didn't know anything about transgender issues. I'm an electrical engineer.
And how old is your son at this point?
At this point, he is almost 13.
Okay.
And I said, what do you mean you're in the wrong body? You are you. What does wrong body even mean? Well, I think I'm a girl. What makes you say that? Well, almost all of my friends are girls. I don't like doing boys' things. I don't like, sports. I like doing certain things girls like to do. Okay. That doesn't necessarily make you a girl. That just means those are things you like. Men come in all shapes and sizes. They're not all linebackers. I mean, look at me. Do I look like a linebacker to you?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm just an average Joe. Well, I have my doubts. I said, okay, let's look at this. Let's do it this way. I will investigate. I'll be honest with you, I know absolutely nothing about it. Okay? I know nothing about transsexuality, very little about homosexuality. All I know is if you're an adult and this is what you present yourself as, it is what it is. Do I accept you being gay? Well, if you are gay, you're gay. I just want grandchildren, regardless. Do I accept you as trans? That'll be harder. I'll be honest with you. Will I learn about it? Will I need therapy? Yes and yes.
So he has one parent who's exuberant about it.
Will I still love you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Will I still support you? Will I still do it? Will you still be my top priority, all three of you? Yes. Okay. Great. So I started learning. Obviously, I thought, if he feels he's a girl, let's investigate. I did the research and discovered all the issues associated with transing children. I discovered the cult of transition. I put two and two together with the cultural Marxism, how this is really not about transing children, or is about as much as transing children as it is about separating children from the parents, because that's a standard thing, right? You need to separate the children from the parents so you can mold them in your...
Well, and as we see, you can sit there and say that. You can say this would separate parents. It would break up families. And that could just simply be your ideology, your belief. But
True.
The fact of the matter is, 2 years in a row now, last year legislative session, and now this one that we're just entering in 2026, we see legislation that is intended to divide. That if one parent isn't enthusiastic enough about even a name change,
Mm-hmm.
it instructs the court to favor the other parent.
That's why last
to
year
divide.
I stood on the steps of the Capitol, scared out of my gourd, and delivered a speech asking to repeal or not approve at the time, right? Not the two amendments that were exactly what you're talking about. And that's still somewhere on YouTube or X or whatever.
Well, they passed a watered down version last year, and this year they're coming back to strengthen it with another bill.
Yes.
This one goes directly to court instructions, as we've explained. And they're just going to keep driving it in this direction. But tell me, so your son, after he tells you, I think I was created in, or whatever verbiage he used, born in.
I think I'm a girl.
Body,
yeah.
Then what happens? Did his mother take him to Children's Hospital? Because they have a whole unit there that advertises this is their specialty. This is what they do. They help very young children transition.
Mm-hmm. As I was investigating, I discovered all this. I started talking to my son about it, telling him, look, whatever you're feeling right now, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. I'm seeing a lot of grooming from your mother for the last few years. I'm seeing a lot of dark spots in this where the cooperation between the activists and the medical establishment, who's going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of you if you go all the way. I'm seeing a lot of this stuff, and what we need to do, you and I, is nothing until you're an adult. Let's do this, I said. Right now, you do absolutely nothing. You grow up, you study, you dance, you play with your friends. When you're an adult, which in man's case tends to be mid-20s, but maybe early 20s, let's draw a line in the sand. Let's call it 18. If you're 18 and you're going to come back to me and say, Dad, I'm a girl, I will support you. Will I understand it? Probably not. Will I ever understand it and agree with it? Maybe never. Will I love you? Absolutely. Will I support you? I'll do what I have to do. You are my child. And if you're making a decision as an adult that I think is wrong, then that's the decision you're going to make, and I'll learn to live with it. Well, that didn't go over well with my ex. She retained something called Med-Arb.
Based on the law passed last year and the one that is being introduced this year, that wouldn't go over well with the court system.
I could lose custody.
Right.
Correct.
Even though it sounds like what your position was fairly loving, it was, I'm not going to judge you. I just think you need to mature a little bit more because this is a permanent decision.
Yes, there is no going back. Colorado law is a separate issue, and it is completely out of bounds. It's completely insane, and it's going more and more in the insane direction. We are now the leading cause of child mutilation. Colorado.
Right. Well, there are 29 states at the Supreme Court right now asking, defending their right to protect children from this, which I think you as well, I consider a form of child abuse, white coat child abuse. Somebody with a credential, call himself, herself a doctor. Been through medical school, sounds legit, looks legit.
Should know better.
Should know better, but it doesn't, and has legitimized that, which, look, we have a State Department that, as long as I've been alive and before then, has been fighting genital mutilation that takes place in other countries for cultural and religious purposes. They still battle that today. Yet, at Children's Hospital in Aurora or any other number of big hospitals throughout Colorado and the United States, there's no State Department walking in and saying, don't generally mutilate these children.
It's all about the moral ground when it comes to the medical professionals. Do you prefer money or do you prefer to live with yourself? And unfortunately, money is winning in Colorado. When it comes to advocacy groups, it's all about, where will my money come from so I can advocate for things? I need my constituency, and politicians as well. When it comes to children, it's ignorance and manipulation. In Colorado, when parents get divorced, the courts almost force, I'm not sure if it's mandatory, it's certainly extremely advised, to have something called mediator arbitrator, who is typically an attorney that just specializes in
the family. It keeps things out of the courtroom.
It keeps bickering parents out of courtrooms because courtrooms are busy dealing with, murders and rapes and drugs.
Right.
Makes sense. Unfortunately, the power of the Med-Arb is essentially a power of a judge. When the Med-Arb makes a decision, that becomes a court order 100% of the time. So we hired...
Because you sign up for that.
I signed up for a Med-Arb, who was still is a Boulder attorney. And when I interviewed him, he said, hey, I am an attorney, but I'm impartial. I don't know much about the subject, but I'm willing to learn. Okay, I'll take that. Then my ex-wife found a therapist, and I interviewed the therapist, and I sat in her office, and, the office was covered in, LGBT flags, and I asked her straightforward, are you an activist or are you a therapist? And she said, I'm a therapist. And we discussed it, and I said, okay, I will take your word, but I want to be able to communicate with you and see where this is going. Well, she was hired, if I'm not mistaken, in October of 2023. By April of 24, my son was convinced that he is a girl. I discovered the term ROGD, Rapid Onset of Gender Dysphoria. What?
Where did you learn this term?
Online. Where else? Holy cow. I read through all of it. She caused ROGD. She convinced him. She affirmed them. Something that in Colorado is a requirement. You cannot, as a therapist, as a medical professional of any sort, to not affirm a child when the child says, I'm trans.
Oh, absolutely not. You may not. You may not.
Those are the 20, God help me, 16, maybe 2018 anti-conversion laws.
Right.
So the law started out as, the old tradition of converting gay into straight. Okay.
Right. And we can all take a position on that, whether it's a good idea or not. But this is the complete opposite of that.
But it is.
It
was written well enough.
Protected and encouraged by the law to encourage, not gay to straight transition. That would be illegal.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not even what we're talking about. We're talking about someone who is now being counseled to change, to become someone other than that person was created as.
Well, you might also say that why is government involved in controlling gay to straight or straight to gay conversion in the first place? That just doesn't seem like the kind of thing that government should be doing. No. I mean, how about we just collect and waste their taxes and stick to that?
Again, look, the left, you come from a communist environment. You grew up under communism. Now, communism does not hold that the family should be the fundamental institution in society that holds society together.
Yep.
In fact, the family is in the way of the state being in control, the state being at the top of the pyramid. So if you have counselors who can do things that divide families the way they have done yours, that would certainly fall in line with anti-Western, left-wing ideology, philosophy, politics, whatever you want to call it.
Left-wing ideology is too broad of a term. What's left-wing, what's right-wing? What are we talking about? I came here thanks to two people, as far as I'm concerned, that I have pictures of in my office. Ronald Reagan and Scoop Jackson. One was obviously a Republican president. The other one was a congressman. That was the left-winger. That was the classic Democrat that I actually don't have any problem with. He absolutely wanted to get rid of the Soviet Union. He was for freedom. He was pro-union. He was pro-this, pro-that, pro-the other. Okay? I would like to see more of that today, if possible. But right now, it's not, because I think the Democratic Party has been hijacked by some of these special interests, and it may take more than one generation to get back to normalcy.
See, the fact that they want arbitration or the court itself, arbitration merely being that's sort of a subcontractor of the court. The court's going to do what the arbitrator decides. Yeah. Means that this is not a decision. You ask, why is the state involved in this? Well, the state, from my position, the state shouldn't be involved in this. It should be a family matter to be resolved by the family. Now, if it turns into abuse, if somebody in that equation is abusive to a child, of course, then the state needs to get involved.
And
but if it can be resolved amicably, they don't want it to be amicably resolved among parents who maybe have different positions on this, as you and your wife do.
If parents want to trans a child, that's not okay. If parents don't want to trans a child, that's okay. If the child is asking parents to do something to him or herself that's irreversible, that child needs to wait until that child is an adult. And we can discuss what an adult means. 18, let's make it 18. I mean, we were all 18 at one point, and I think we were all idiots at 18, especially men. I was. I thought I was the smartest person in the world and I will live forever. And then by about my early 20s, I discovered that, I think my father's the smartest person I'll ever meet. That's called maturity. And it's also a circle of life, right? We all go through this. We go through the rebellion period. We all think our parents are idiots, and then we come around to going, oh, I guess they're not. That's called maturity. That's called growing up. That's called being an adult. Okay? Anything that child wants to do that's may permanently alter that child should not be done. If my child comes to you, Dr. Wayne, and says, Doc, I'm a bird. I'm 100% guarantee you cross my heart and hope to die, I'm a bird. You don't go, well, what kind of bird? I'm an eagle. I'm definitely an eagle. Can you chop off my arms and give me eagle wings?
Indeed, I have such a procedure. Yes.
I can do that. You see that bald eagle in the corner over there in the cage? That's why he's here, because I will need his wings. Okay? So what you just did is you just affirmed the child, which is what the law requires for trans children.
Right.
You just butchered the child and removed his arms. And you just installed the wings, which is, we're in the, utopian, whatever world you want to say. Will that child be a bird? I don't know. We can discuss. I don't know. I don't think so. But is the child going to regret it? Possibly. Possibly not. Will the child just sit on a tree and, raise chicks? Maybe. That child should not have made that decision until the child knew what it entails. And that you don't get till you're an adult. That's why they are children.
What happened to your child? You had this, what sounds like from your perspective,
I had that discussion.
A very loving discussion.
Absolutely.
I will love you no matter who you are, no matter who you become. But let's wait until you're old enough to make a permanent decision. So what happened instead of your advice? What did your wife do? And what did Children's Hospital do?
Well, all right. Then that's the next chapter. I spent the entire summer of 2023, last year's 24, writing 8, what I can only call dissertations to the Med-Arb, to this lawyer that was basically a judge, explaining to him all the issues that are involved in transing children. Everything from the fact that WPATH, the organization that supposedly the authority in transing, all the issues, all the advocacy problems, all the statistics, all the lack of statistic, lack of research, and all of that was ignored. In October of 24, he issued the what became a court order saying that, parents maintain 50-50 custody, which we do. 100% of power of medical decision regarding the true center goes to his mother, and she can do with him what she pleases. By November of 24, he had an interview, a Zoom or telehealth, whatever they're called, interview with an intake person at Children's Hospital's True Center for Gender Diversity, who themselves was a transgender man.
Mm-hmm.
So a woman that is now a man. So no issues there, no impartiality at all. After a 30-minute interview, he was admitted to the center.
At what age now?
He is now 14.
Okay. Not now, but at the time we're talking about right now.
At that time, he is 14. This is a little over a year ago. So he's now 14.
And he's still prepubescent at that time.
He is entering puberty.
Okay.
Okay. He was entering puberty. He was immediately put on puberty blockers, and he is on those blockers through today.
And he will never go through puberty. That will not happen.
Unless I can stop it.
I had a doctor in here who's pretty well versed on all of this. Dr. Travis Morrell, I think you know him.
Oh, I do know. That's how I found you.
And he said, you block puberty, you get one shot at it. You get one shot at it. If you don't go through it, you don't go through it.
Yep.
And for some, there's a reason that humanity can't understand, just like we can't contemplate the vastness of the universe and whatever space and time the universe is in and where it came from. We can't contemplate why human beings go through puberty, but for some reason we do. And it's probably important, but your son never will now. And you had no say in it, that the court took that from you. The Children's Hospital took that from you.
I still have a chance if I can stop it now. So I appealed the decision. It failed the appeal with the Boulder court. Not surprising. It went to the Colorado District Court, which is where we are right now. I will take it to the Colorado Supreme Court. Do I have a chance of overturning this? I don't know. It's not clear. Probably not. But
there are three cases now.
Let me put it to you this way. Hang on.
Sure.
This is something I want to say, and I want for your audience to hear. First and foremost, I'm a father. I was put on this God-green earth to take care of my 3 children. I have no higher priority. I am not rich. I'm an electrical engineer, so I'm not poor. I have a house and a roof over my head, and I pay the bills. I have some savings. I have a retirement fund. If all of it, every penny of it, goes towards saving my child, it is fine with me because I have no higher calling than saving my child from mutilation. And that's what he's going through right now. Okay? So I just want to make it perfectly clear.
And again, you wouldn't fight this battle if he were 19, 20.
No. I would say, you know what? I have raised you. I did my part. As a father, I did my calling. At this point, you're 19, and whatever I didn't give you is probably too late. At this point, you are the one that has to make decisions about your life. You have to make decision of what job to pick. You have a decision of to get married or not get married. You can ask me for my opinion and I'll give it to you. You can ask me for my preference and I'll give it to you. But ultimately, not only is the decision yours and yours alone, but I will support you in that decision because you will be my child until I'm dead. And I will always love you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the approach I'm taking. Yes, going through the court system is extremely expensive. I have several lawyers that I found through, and we can talk about that as well, through these underground that are kind of bursting towards overground organizations like parent support groups, like Do No Harm. I guess GenSpec can be included into that. There are several others, CPAN, Colorado Parents Advocacy Network. All these organizations are trying to break through and get access to people to tell them that, look, we are creating a generation of mutilated people that we have to stop. We're taking gay children and turning them into opposite sex. And this is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. This is an issue of protecting children. I've talked to both the right-wing gay groups and the left-wing gay groups, and they're of the same opinion. That's where I'm at right now. Now, something interesting happened 2 weeks ago. Colorado Children's Hospital and the True Center of Gender Diversity stopped doing gender care.
Right. They
I'm
stopped.
using rabbit ears.
They stopped
because they were,
and then they started again.
Yes.
No, and this is all because the Trump administration.
They started a year ago, and they stopped this mutilation. I'm going to just call it mutilation because that's what I believe they're doing.
It is.
For like a week until Colorado joined the lawsuit of, I think, like several Western states in fighting it. Now the Human Health Services, HHS, is that what HHS stands for?
Health and Human Services.
Told the hospital that you will lose your financing, you will lose your Medicare financing if you continue. Well, that's probably half of their budget. Something we don't realize in our halfway broken medical system is a lot of money actually comes from the government.
Right.
Topic for another session.
Has this helped your cause at all, or is this still continuing with your son?
I don't know.
They've stopped.
I don't know. And here's why I don't know.
It's very fluid.
It's not just the fluidity. It's the court order that specifies that I am not to talk to my child about transgender issues. I am not to contact any of the medical professionals. And I am not allowed to look at any charts or reports that they generate.
And now there's a new law coming, a proposal that you wouldn't even be able to look at a court record pertaining to a name change. If your child wanted to change names, you don't get to look at that. You don't get to know about it. You're supposed to abide by it, but you don't get to know about it officially, according to this bill.
I hope the law is challenged, to the highest court, and hopefully some of these laws, just like the one at the Supreme Court right now, my child was injected with the subcutaneous injection of something called sertraline. Okay, it stops puberty blocking for a prolonged period of time. You don't need weekly injections. Mm-hmm. I don't know when he was injected last. I would like to take a knife and take the injection out, except I don't think that's how this works. I am trying to drive my attorneys in that direction that says if Children's Hospital has suspended all care, that needs to be removed and the child needs to continue with puberty. Minus the year that he lost. Mm-hmm. Hopefully the damage is contained. That's what I'm working on right now. And the lawyers are doing a lot of other things and reviewing other things that they probably don't want me talking about because we don't know where it's going. But the only chance we have of overturning some of this stuff is the legal system. Colorado is a blue state, and the blue party is currently completely overrun by extremists, completely overrun by cultural Marxism, which is what's caused all this. Legal system is the only short-term cure. The long-term solution is information. We need to shed the light on these doctors. We need to shed the light on the government organizations, NGOs. We need to shed the light on what is driving this. That this is not about protecting marginalized community. That's a popular term nowadays. That has nothing to do with it. And I don't think left or right wingers will object to protecting marginalized communities. I certainly want.
Of course not.
You
No,
won't either.
Not at all.
That's not what this is about.
But they make it look like that's what this is about.
Well, of course. That's what
and
Marxism
that you're
is.
some sort of a bigot, a hateful person. Now, our
Proletariat of the world unite.
I
Don't
encourage
forget that phrase.
anyone, yes. I encourage anyone listening or watching or both to research, because I've grown up knowing this. I don't what our State Department has to say about gender mutilation. Gender mutilation, pardon me.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, mutilation, gender mutilation. The United States is committed to ending particularly female genital mutilation, and they're talking about that this is a common practice in countries other than ours. They're talking about sub-Saharan Africa. They're talking about Middle East and North Africa, Asia, countries throughout Asia.
It's all the countries where women are not people, they are property.
Right, and they get mutilated for the same reason that some countries tie up the feet of young women so that they don't grow large.
Yep.
They bind up their feet.
Yep.
This kind of mutilation goes on in barbaric countries around the world, yet somehow when it happens here in the United States as part of what you call a cultish, or as our friend Dr. Morell calls it, a social contagion, almost like a disease of the mind. We don't even fight it here in the United States. Well, we do. Look, we've got cases in front of the Supreme Court right now defending states that are trying to prevent this. But our State Department's worried about children in Indonesia. Yet we do it here, and it's considered legitimate medicine at some of the greatest hospitals in the world. Children's Hospital in Aurora, Colorado, is about as high as it gets in the pecking order of hospitals for children. I don't get it. It makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever.
So is Boston Children's. So are children's hospitals in LA. These are premier centers for saving children, deformed children, mentally challenged, mentally children. We take care of these kids where the rest of the world can't. We have the top specialists saving children from whatever problem those children have, except for this one case of where a child shows up and says, I'm a boy who thinks he's a girl, or I'm a girl that thinks that she is a boy.
And I'm 8.
And oh, by the way, I'm not sexually mature to even understand what a boy or a girl is. I just feel like I am.
So where are you? Your son is undergoing this, even if Children's has stopped for the moment. And like I say, if you look at news stories, they stop, and then they start, and then they stop, and it depends on whatever court order has come down late. Most recently from some district court.
They didn't stop anything. All that's going to happen is that these doctors will go into private practice, and the Children's Hospital will refer them to the private practice.
It hasn't stopped with your son.
To get around. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think it happened yet, but I don't know. I think the True Center employees will just be transferred to the True Center private practice. And the Children's Hospital will say, okay, well, we don't do any child mutilation. We don't do anything. They do. You deal with them.
Motivated by very dark political aspirations and money. Money. These are in the mix.
Yep. So follow the money.
Tell me about your family right now. Are you in communication with your ex-wife who is encouraging this?
I don't have a choice. We have a split custody of our kids. I am communicating with her.
Is it civilized?
It's text and emails, and I keep it as civilized as I can. I don't threaten. I'm not a threatening person. I never yell at kids. I have a great relationship with all 3 of my kids. Mm-hmm. I love them to pieces, and they seem to love me. We'll see what happens when they turn 18, but that's a different story. Right now, we have a great relationship. Right now, the twins have their driver's permits, and I don't think my car is going to survive a year of their driving. And I'm not sure I will either. Oh, yeah, you had 6 of them, I know. But there is nothing I can do with my ex because she is a high society narcissist. And when you being right is more important than the welfare of your child, that tells you of what kind of communication you can establish with such a person. Okay? When the person thinks they're never wrong about anything, when they're ivory tower college person that's separated from the everyday life, there is no hope in convincing her that what she's doing is wrong, that what she's doing is damaging the child, because that would imply that she made the wrong decision. And she's been fooled by the high society. And I think it's harder to convince people that they've been fooled than to actually fool them.
There is this sort of faux intellectualism throughout academia, that if I can justify something countercultural that seems to go against common sense and wisdom that has developed throughout the ages and customs of societies, I am therefore higher educated and smarter than anyone else who doesn't agree with me on this issue. That seems to be sort of, this seems to have infected academia. It's no longer about historic facts and absolute knowledge. It's about these trends that turn everything upside down, that actually make people with common sense question themselves whether am I just an idiot because I think that it's a bad idea to surgically or chemically mutilate a child? Where does this come from?
Well, try being married to someone like that, someone who is a master debater, somebody you can never win an argument with like that, just because she is professionally trained to stick and move, right? And I'm an electrical engineer with a Russian accent. I believe some of it, there's probably 2 parts to it. One is physical isolation from the everyday life. When you're in academia, you kind of stewing in this stew that's isolated from the real world, from the rest of the world. And when you lose this base of societal base of right and wrong, maybe it's 10 commandments, maybe it's whatever. When you lose it and now your baseline is, how do the smart people see this? That tends to spiral out of control. Because if you don't have a basis for your intellectual derivations, you can justify everything from murder to, it's like, if you don't believe in thou shalt not kill, if you don't believe it came from God, you think it just came from some guy in ancient Israel, then it's no longer your driving force. It's now something that you can argue against. Maybe it is okay to kill. And the second part is, where does the money come from? Our university system is not really geared to educate kids. It's geared towards research. And we can talk about indoctrination another time, but it's geared towards research. You get research money, and that's how you make a living as a college professor. Well, you don't get paid money for doing a research and saying, yep, nuclear family is the way to go. No. You get money for doing research that breaks the established thoughts. Now, some of it is discovery of new things, which is great. Some of it is saying, nope, everything we believed up to now is, especially in the arts and such, not in sciences, everything we believe right now is not true. Common core education is the way to go. Well, why? Well, that's because it is. And here are some reasons.
This kind of self-indulgent, self-assigned elitism that leads to sort of top-down central control of everything. And every evil dictatorial form of tyrannical governance we've ever seen emerges from this mindset.
And that's the French Enlightenment. That is where it comes from. I mean, I'm sure it comes from antiquity, but Jean-Jacques Rousseau talked exactly about that. The world should be driven and controlled by a group of experts, right? As opposed to Scottish Enlightenment, which is what America is based off of, the Adam Smith. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you leave people alone, if people lead, leaders will follow.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's an interesting aspect to it. How many people can actually trace it? I mean, I am lucky in the sense that I can see this problem from two sides, from the side of freedom, America, and the side of complete oppression, which is the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. That gave me a very unique opportunity to make that connection. Right now, universities teach us that America is an imperialistic, abusive, and all of the world's problems can be traced to the United States. Amen.
That does seem to be the underlying philosophy of higher education right now. Yes. And therefore, the enemy of my enemy, which is Western society, is my friend. So that's how you can end up being a transsexual, standing on the street corner, advocating for a form of governance that would have you killed instantly.
That's how you ended up with Gays for Palestine. Exactly.
Right. Sir, I am so sorry about what you're going through. I hope that you prevail, and
I hope
and that your son, whoever he is destined to be as an adult, turns out the way that he should be, and not the result of undue influence by people who don't have his best interest at heart.
I will not give up because I have no higher calling than being a father.
I can relate to that. There is no higher calling for men than fatherhood. Well,
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us on the set today.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you
for
traveling
all this way.
Absolutely.